Brazil does not defeat criminal factions because they are in the government. I agree with you, Mr. Bukele.
E se você pensa que já viu violência, caos e manipulação, eu preciso que você respire fundo, porque a verdade sobre o crime no nosso país é muito mais profunda do que mostram na TV. E Deus mostrou o que vem aí. Fica comigo até o final, porque ignorar essa mensagem pode te pegar de surpresa no momento mais crítico.
Brazil does not defeat criminal factions because they are in the government. I agree with you, Mr. Bukele. Most Honorable President of this forum, Congressman Robert Pittenger, Congressmen, Ambassadors, Delegate-in-Chiefs, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nicolas Ferreira. I'm a Christian and a father of 2 daughters, married, of course. Before coming the most voted congressman in Brazil, I was born and raised in a favela, and I saw up close how violence destroys a neighborhood, a city, a state, and now an entire country. And today I will speak without the filter that the media imposes. I will speak about the reality of my nation. Today in Brazil, there are 88 mapped criminal organizations operating from inside Brazilian prisons. Of these, 72 operate locally, 14 regionally, and 2 transnationally. More than half, 58%, have as their main activity the direct confrontation against the state. In other words, they no longer hide. They openly challenge the state. These factions impose rules, control territories, punish, charge taxes, and most seriously, they use terror as a form of government. 11% of the Brazilian population lives in territories under the direct influence of criminal factions. But the most alarming data comes from a study entitled Criminal Governance in Latin America. Between 50 and 60 million Brazilians, roughly 1/4 of the population, live under what is called criminal governments, an authoritarian and violent regime that decides who enters and who lives. In other words, 1/4 of the Brazilian population lives under a government that was not elected, does not provide accountability, and does not respect the Constitution or the law. The consequences are tragic and daily. In their own system of justice, the Red Command, one of the most notorious Brazilian factions, uses several methods of torture and execution to punish misconduct, eliminate rivals, and repress residents who oppose or report their activities. Torture sections are frequently recorded and circulated in messaging groups as a warning to the community. The newest method involves both torture and corpse disposal using alligators. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, alligators. Another consequence brought by criminal factions is the warlike atmosphere and the rise in deaths caused by stray bullets. According to the Crossfire Institute, the number of stray bullets victims in Rio de Janeiro grew up by 58% in the year 2025. In the first 75 days of this year, 41 people were struck compared to 26 in the same period the previous year. Innocent people, children, workers, father, die simply for being in the wrong place in the wrong country. And once again, I agree with President Bukele when he says that the first step to fixing a country is to bring peace. Because it's useless to have healthcare, education, and roads if you do not have security, and may end up being killed by a straight bullet on the way. And it gets worse. In the year 2024, Brazil recorded an increase of 33.8% in deaths of police officers. 170 officers were murdered, men and women who left home to protect society and returned in coffins draped with the national flag. Another 126 committed suicide, victims of psychological abandonment and the constant pressure of being treated as criminals for simply enforcing the law. But Brazil's tragedy goes beyond regional statistics. In just 2 years, there were 73,190 lives lost, all Brazilians murdered within their own territory. To give perspective, the Gaza Strip, the stage of a declared war between Israel and Hamas, 67,869 people were killed in 2 years of conflict. In other words, Brazil, with no civil war, foreign invasion, no missiles, no tanks, kills more than a war. As if the terrifying death too were not enough, in Brazil the factions also spread terror by charging fees from small business owners just to allow a store to operate. There are reports of bar owners and street vendors executed for not paying extortion. They control telecommunications, transportation, security, food, water, and even the price of the cooking gas. It's a parallel state, totalitarian, armed, and unpunished. But the real scandal is this: such a parallel state only exists because the official state tolerates it and often funds it. Beyond extortion, factions expel families from their homes, leaving them homeless, and then rent these properties to finance the criminal organizations. In Fortaleza, capital of the state of Ceará, residents were expelled from their own homes in at least 49 neighborhoods. In 21 months, 219 expulsions were recorded, according to the Public Security Secretariat. To understand the severity of what's happening in Brazil, I will give you the example of PCC, the First Capital Command, one of the most powerful factions in Latin America. Founded in 1993 inside the São Paulo prison system, the PCC began as a alleged brotherhood of prisoners against state abuse. 30 years later, it has become a transnational criminal organization operating in 19 Brazilian states and with confirmed presence in Paraguay, Bolivia, and Colombia. Brazil must restore balance among the powers. This is not about attacking the judiciary. It's about rebuilding constitutional harmony. We need accountability mechanism, limits, reviews, transparency. Democracy is only healthy when power is divided and supervised. Without control, power becomes corruption. El Salvador teaches us that political courage and moral leadership can transform a nation. But courage is not only about confronting crime in the streets. It's also about confronting the structures that protect crime in the courts. Brazil does not need more laws. It needs justice that obeys the law. It does not need more speeches about democracy. It needs institutions that respect democracy. As long as Parliament is mute and the judiciary untouchable, corruption will remain unpunished, factions will continue to govern, and the Brazilian people will remain victims of a state afraid to act. May this meeting in El Salvador inspire a new era, an era which Parliament rebalances power, returns to the Constitution, and the people believe once again that the law applies to everyone, includes who interpreted it. Que Dios bendiga a todos.
Thank you very much for those refreshing insights. It really resonated with me. You got my vote, and give a plaque for you. Thank you again.
O crime no Brasil não é só violência nas ruas, é uma disputa espiritual pela alma da nação. Mas Deus está conosco e você deixa teu like. Isso faz essa mensagem alcançar quem está precisando. Se inscreve no canal, porque aqui você recebe alertas que não vão aparecer na TV. E continua comigo, porque tem mais vídeos na tela agora mesmo que vão abrir ainda mais os teus olhos.